Look, I think it's official, and we can say that Ronnie is a better person than all of us. Because we all know we would tell Lily to kick rocks. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. The third episode of the It prequel series, Welcome to Derry, is here. It is called Now You See It. I don't think it's a stretch for me to say that this is the episode that I have liked the least out of the first three episodes. Some of it is back because of the shoddy CGI that happens in a couple of scenes, but also I just don't feel like a lot. There are character beats that happen in this, but this episode feels like filler, and that some of these pieces could have gotten to faster, and we could have gotten there in another episode and didn't have to spend an entire episode to do what it is that we do outside of the Shaw stuff. The kid stuff feels like that could have been tacked on somewhere else, and we could have gotten there without spending an entire episode to do so. But we start off in 1908. We're looking at General Shaw, a young Shaw, in Derry. There's a traveling circus that's in town in Derry, and he happens upon a tent where it seems like the manifestation, the first round of Pennywise is happening, and fear sort of latches on to him. And then that spirit, that essence, travels and follows with him as he goes along. He runs into and befriends a young Rose, who Rose is the Native American. I'm going to say Native American. I don't want to put a tribe on her. Who is the pawn shop owner that we've seen Hanlon's wife go to quite a few times. They befriend each other, and they're having a good relationship. They're friendly. They're just two friends living it up, having a good time. The Pennywise essence goes after Shaw, and he gets freaked out about it. Has a conversation with Rose. They go have a back and forth when they're young, but eventually, what happens is he decides to leave. And what we learn later in the episodes is that when a person leaves Derry, they forget that Derry exists. They forget anything that happened in Derry, any relationships they had, any people connections that they had. It just drops, and when you return, they come back. And so that's a interesting piece to sort of learn that, like, Derry acts almost like a sort of a warp, and once you're out of it, you forget that it happened. That's interesting. I don't know if that creates a little bit of a technical issue, in that the first episode, it seemed like Maddie got far enough away out of Derry, but I guess he was still in the circumference enough to still be under the pull of Derry, and then the car turned back around. So maybe it's not that big of a deal. I don't know what the line of demarcation is for, like, Derry to still be Derry, but that's what happens here. Because eventually he escapes and leaves Derry, and then this puts a little bit more onus on Shaw's grown-up version of why he's so steadfast in going after the entity of fear. It's less of, hey, we want to. Yes, he's hiding it under the guise of, like, the military wants to weaponize this, but it's also a personal thing in that he wants to figure out what it is that has made his mind and his body just feel the way that it has, unknowingly for a lot of it, for so long. In present day, we see Lily is getting released from Juniper Hill after her a new stay as being a psych patient there. Cool, good riddance. Keep her in there. She's a terrible human being. It is. I will say this: it is hard for me to care about Lily, and she tries to sort of course correct it in this episode. But it's hard for me to care about Lily when she got a black man put in jail for no reason whatsoever. Now, yes, you could say that the people there would have a hard time believing her because she is crazy. It's going to even be worse now. But something about that just doesn't sit right with me. And she seemed to be kind of like, oh yeah, well, I mean, I tried, but I care more about my self-preservation than that. I get the self-preservation piece, but as a black dude, just doesn't sit right with me. So Lily, kick rocks. But because of what she did, the chief Bowers goes to Hank's cell and says that he's got an eyewitness, and he kind of plays this game with, like, these cigarettes to place the type of cigarettes that he smokes at the scene of where he would have been, and saying, like, hey, eyewitness said you were there, they saw you drop this. It's all a big setup. It's all a big ruse. We as an audience know that he had nothing to do with it. He wasn't there with those kids, and that he was where he said he was. But what that scene does is sort of put a time clock on the kids. Like, we need to hurry up and get Hank out of this situation, or it's going to end up really bad for him really quickly. It's just there for a clock, because outside of that, we know that they're going to do everything possible to jam up Hank. So this scene isn't necessary for that piece, but it's to say, hey, kids, let's get to what we got to get to. Ronnie returns to school, and Lily also is allowed to go back to school. I don't know how this Juniper Hill stuff goes. I guess you can get checked in for a day or two and then get back out, or a week, whatever. But she is allowed to go back to school. So Ronnie goes to school, and she is getting bullied pretty harshly. People are writing stuff on her locker. It's not a good look for her. It's a twofold piece. It's one, it's primarily because her dad has just been arrested, so they're making fun of that. But there's only about 4 or 5 black kids here, so it feels even heavier that all of these kids are looking at her and pointing at her and treating her like crap. On top of the fact that then she is worried about her father. It's just a lot happening for Ronnie. Will and Rich are kind of standing on the sidelines, like, oh, that sucks, because Will had a sort of a connection with Ronnie. He sort of feels for her, and says, like, she doesn't seem like the type of person who comes from a family where they would do what it is that they're saying her dad did. Like, something doesn't driving her, something doesn't make sense. Ronnie tries to scrub off a saying that is on her locker, but it's just not coming off, and she smears it in enough where the words aren't there anymore, but it's all over her hands. So she has to go to the bathroom to get it off, and then Lily comes in trying to be good Samaritan with some alcohol rubbing agent to help get that off of her hands. And Ronnie's quickly like, "Hey, don't come in here acting like we BFFs. I don't like you, ho. Get away from me." And it's probably the most honest reaction that I think anybody's really had in this episode. Like, what? Why are you talking to me? We not cool. Lily at that point says, like, I'll tell them that your dad's innocent and that he had nothing to do with it, but no one is going to believe me now because I just spent another stint in Juniper Hill. Like, they now have tagged me with the fact that I'm crazy. So they have done everything possible to set up and create this story to say that your dad did this. We have to do something outside of the box to come up with, like, hey, he didn't. Here's why. Here's the evidence. And Ronnie's like, well, what evidence can we get about stuff that you and I only see? And Lily's like, well, look, maybe when this spirit, this essence occurs and happens to us, we get some photos of it. And Ronnie's like, how the hell do you think that's going to work? But they come up with devise a plan to sort of do so, and they enlist Will and Rich. They go and get Will and Rich to say, hey, can you be a part of us? Help us out here. Ronnie gets Will because how smart he was about the smoke bomb, the stink bomb, and the chemicals in that. She figured that, hey, you might be smart enough to come up with the chemicals to go ahead and develop photos, because we can't take this to a normal photo lab, because what may appear on this might make them look nuts and might go beyond where they needed to go to. So they want to do it in-house. So the boys are down. They're like, yeah, cool, we'll do it. More so because Will probably sort of has a thing for Ronnie and feels bad for the situation that Ronnie is going through. The last episode ended with them finding the car, which we now find out sort of leads to nothing. Nothing is really found in that car. And so they have Dick Halloran do his thing with his shining, and has a pretty wild vision of, like, bodies on a battlefield, dying in a war, bodies floating. It's a lot. It's clear that when Dick goes into these manifestations of the shining, it's a lot for him to sort of deal with. While he's in that mode, sort of like glossed over, Leroy grabs him and saves him from basically falling out of a helicopter. So he saves his life, and sort of as a come together moment, he invites him over to dinner. Now we learn that Leroy sort of has some ulterior motives for that, but he wants to sort of get to know him a little bit more to see, like, hey, why are you in this situation? Because you clearly, I know why I'm here, because they told me that I have no fear. You seem to have something else going on with you, and I kind of want to get down to the bottom of it. So he invites her over to the house for dinner. Grown up Francis Shaw goes to go see Rose at her shop, and she immediately recognizes the voice. I'm like, Shaw? And he's like, yes, I didn't remember you which is a wild thing to say to a woman. She even clocks like, "Oh, that's just what I want to hear." She's like, "I didn't remember you at all until I came back to Derry." And she's like, "Yeah, this place has a sort of habit of doing that." And this when we see the flashback of her telling him as much, but he doesn't remember that part. But he's there to serve her an eviction notice. Like he remembered her name once it came up on the eviction notice. Like, "Oh, I know this name." They're trying to evict her off of a piece of land because they want to do digging there. And she's like, "No, that's sacred land. I don't want you guys around there." And what is it that it is you're looking for? Charles is like, "We're just trying to find something. There's something that I think can get to the essence of what's happening in this city." But he's like, "I'm here to involve you and bring you in on the digging sites because you know where we should and should not go. And I don't want to be disrespectful to you. So would you be able to help me out with these digs?" And she's like, "Give me some time. Let me think about it." While at the dinner with Leroy and Halloran, Charlotte, his wife, is there. So it's just the three of them because obviously the kids are all gallivanting, doing their things. So one thing about this city of Derry, they don't give a damn about these kids. They let these kids run around and do whatever you want. And I would say probably as a black couple, you probably shouldn't want your kids just roaming around the streets late at night. I get Ronnie because her dad's not is locked up. But Will, how is Charlotte and Leroy okay with Will just running around? Sure, okay. While at the dinner, though, you can tell that Dick is reading Charlotte's brain, but not sort of giving that off. But Leroy knows that he has some type of a gift. He's sort of letting this kind of like ride a little bit. But Charlotte is very much without saying it until she kind of is forced to say it, is that her activism and her being such a staunch supporter of her activism and black rights gets Leroy in trouble. And they tell her to sort of quote that and calm all of that down while we're here and be a little bit more docile and accepting so that he can ascend. Because if he doesn't, it's going to stop that momentum of growth for her husband. And she's like, "Okay, cool. Then this is what I'll do." Dick then mentions Leroy's son, which Leroy immediately knows, like, "I never told you about my son." Which he knows, like, this guy's playing around in my head. And so Charlie goes to get some dessert and they go outside to have a smoke and a conversation. And it's at that point that Leroy's like, "Hey, I never told you about my son. I never mentioned my son." And he's like, "Oh yeah, you probably mentioned it in passing at one of the works." Like, "No, never told you about my son. I don't know what it is that you're doing or what it is that you got, but I'm now starting to see who you are. Stay out of my damn head." Because the feeling that I just had a moment ago when you mentioned my son is the same feeling that I had when I was attacked by those three men in my room. And you were one of the ones there. You weren't the one with the pipe. So I'm gonna let you live. But you were definitely there digging around in my brain. Cut that mess out. And Dick's like, "Don't worry, I'm not going back in your brain." And he says it in a way that Leroy's like, "Well, wait, okay, why are you saying it in that manner?" And it's at that point Dick's like, "Hey, I looked in your brain, and where the sector where fear should be, it wasn't. You feared nothing. You, in fact, in that moment, were analyzing the entire situation. I've never seen anybody operate in that manner before, and so you don't have to worry about me ever going in your head again. Because nah, mm-mm. I I don't go in. I don't want to spend time in there because you different. You're a different animal." And it's at that point that Dick's like, "Look, I would never go back in your head. I would never disrespect you again because if you are a person who has no fear, I want you on my side. I want to ride together. So don't worry. I'm never going to use this against you again. But you, the two of us, we can use this against others. Sort of make a pact." Speaking of pact, the kiddos, Rich tells the kids they go to a cemetery, and Rich tells the kids that the rest of the crew that Pennywise is probably like an Oshira. It's a spirit that latches on, and that is what they're being hunted by. And so then they try to do this like incantation, if you will, to summon Pennywise. It's something that Rich has said, "Hey, my cousin or uncle or somebody a part of his family." The story changes every 5 minutes. You can tell that Rich is a BSer. And when the kids learn that it's a BS, Lily and Ronnie's like, "All right, man, you full of stuff. I thought we had something here. I thought we were trying to do it because we're trying to get the photos." Nothing comes. So they get on their bikes and start running out. Rich and Will are like, oh man, we can't just have them roaming around the cemetery by themselves. Let's help them. We said we are going to help them. Let's help them. So then they get on their bikes and they follow behind. I didn't mention the shoddy CGI that happened earlier in the episode in the flashback with Shaw, young Shaw, and the possession that sort of comes after him. It looks bad. This looks worse. There's a sequence where the kids are trying to leave the cemetery, and the cemetery sort of extends itself. It's not allowing them to escape. And then we see a lot of spirits and whatnot, a lot of versions of Pennywise trying to attack these kids. And they're trying to get out of there. You see floating ghosts. It would be terrifying if either A, you showed less of the spirits, or B, you went a little bit more practical. It's a little harder to do practical when you're trying to do motion scene as well, but it's the idea of the scene stretching out that makes it look CGI'd and look goofy. It undercuts the scene a little bit. And I know I'm supposed to be in fear and terrified about these kids being in peril, but it doesn't read on the screen. That said, in all of it, they end up taking photos of a couple of the things. They take it back, they get it developed, Will does his thing, puts the correct stuff in it, gets a photo, and they see in the photo that it is a picture of a clown. And then that's how the episode ends. I will say that this series is taking a long walk to get us to Pennywise. And some of them work. I think the bedroom with the mom, that works. Some of them don't work. I think the pickle scene was a little too goofy, a little too CGI. I think the bat flying out. And so we all have made the price of admission to see Pennywise is who we're here for. And so for us to go 3 episodes, and this is the first, we see a Sasquatch-like background image of Pennywise, leaves a little bit to be desired. But looks like we're on that road to get there, and we're finally going to see him hopefully in the next episode. I will say this, though, for those who don't know about the production of this show, the first 3 episodes of this were filmed prior to the writer's strike. And I think the ones 4 and on were done afterwards. So there is a bit of you're going to see a bit of a growth spurt in some of these kids because there was enough time that passed that they grow. Like, you can't control how kids grow in real life. And so those actors may not look the same by the time that we see them again. And so I'm going to be interested to see how they handle, or if they handle a time jump, or if they just kind of just like, nope, ignore the fact that they're a little taller, voices are a little deeper, girls or boys are going through puberty. Like, just ignore that. We're going to still deal with this the way that we are. So, how do I feel about this episode? I think this is the weakest one. I think the only thing that really stands out for me is the fact that Dick and Leroy sort of make a bond, a connection. But the kid stuff could have been truncated to a point where, hey, here's the hideout that I used to have with the kids that are dead now. Let's go ahead and make this plan. It feels like we're stretching the story out, and it doesn't need to be. Where I think we get into a habit sometimes like, oh, we got 8 episodes, let's stretch this out. Like, okay, cool, we got 8 episodes, but what if, hear me out, we could tell the same story in 5? Why not do that? And I think that's where I'm kind of getting to right now with this show. What did you guys think about the 3rd episode of Welcome to Derry called Now You See? Go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on X at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.